Good evening, everyone. This will be my retrospective project. The retrospective project looks at TASC standard non-professional learning and ethical practice, which says that the teacher engages in ongoing professional learning and uses evidence to continually evaluate his or her practices, particularly the effects in his or her choices and actions on others. This includes learners, families, other professionals, and the community, and it adapts practice to meet the needs of each learner. I will break down this standard by discussing examples from my time in EDUC 4400. The first part of the standard says that the teacher engages in professional learning. During my time at EDCU 4400, I worked on three projects. For my first project, I chose to create a unit on a future subject that I planned on teaching in my science class. My task was to create a full unit, not just one lesson. I chose to develop a unit on matter and energy. This unit included vocabulary, tests, quizzes, and activities. Me personally, I'm particularly bad at planning and organizing, but through this project, I was able to become more structured and organized. This project helped me truly learn and see the value of being prepared. For my second project, I worked on formative and summative assessments. During this project, I had to create two summative assessments and 10 formative assessments. For this project, I had to understand what the difference between these assessments were. I had to learn that there are different ways to test students' abilities. I learned that as students are different, so can the test be that measures what they learn. I learned that you do not have to have a standardized test. You do have to use standardized tests in the classroom. That there are a wide variety of methods that could meet each children's needs. That there are different ways to measure what students have learned, and those don't have to be a standard 10 question multiple choice test or um, they fill in the blank. It can just be a variety of different things. For my third project, I wanted to do something a little different. I'm a first year teacher. I just started this year and came into a classroom with no experience in how to manage a classroom. I had trouble managing my classroom. I wanted to find ways to help my classroom run more efficiently. So, for this project, I decided to research classroom management techniques. The skills that I learned from this project will go with me and continue to improve how I run my classroom in the future. The next part of the standard says that the teacher uses evidence to continually evaluate your practice, particularly the effects of his or her choices and actions on others. This was referring to learners, families, other professionals, and the community. So, over the course of the semester, I had to use a variety of resources to understand and be able to complete my projects. For my first project, to create a unit, I had to first look at the North Carolina, the NC standards for sixth grade. Then, on top of that, I had to look at the pacing guides that were provided for Pitt County. Um, I had to use this to see what students should be learning. The North Carolina Standards was a valuable resource that I will continue to use in the future because this is what's required of North Carolina teachers and or Pitt County teachers. This tells you what students should be learning by a certain point. Um, it would also help keep me on task to make sure I'm teaching what I'm supposed to be teaching. That everything that I'm teaching is what a sixth grader should be able to know. And these documents are particularly helpful, and I'll continue to use them because they are great for helping me organize my lesson plans. I know what to teach, so I can plan around what I need to teach. I also use Google to help me get a better idea and to research formative and summative examples for my second project. I also use my fellow students and classmates and coworkers to get an idea of what good tests should look like, and to get some good ideas on how to form my own tests. During my third project, I used Google Scholar to find ideas on classroom management. I also used a book by Harry and Rosemary Wong called The Classroom Management Book to get ideas on my project. I also reflected on all the advice that my principal gave me, that my fellow coworkers gave me, and that my mentors gave me, have given me throughout the year to ranging on a variety of topics from classroom management techniques as well as to ideas for taking exams. To improve my teaching over time, I will continue to use resources like my coworkers, as well as rely on technological help from things like Study Island, which show a progression of how students are doing over time in a particular assignment. I will also continue to use things like Canvas, PowerSchool, Google Classroom. These are resources where you can assign assignments, but not only that, you can check how students are progressing from one assignment to the other, and it keeps track of students' progress. You can also see what students are struggling on. You can keep a digital database on what students are struggling on, so you'll know what areas to hit, and so you can be able to help each individual student. I will also continue to use resources like Teachers Pay Teachers. Teachers Pay Teachers has a good variety of different lesson plan ideas, different activities for whichever grade level you're teaching. Um, it's other similar teachers, what they have taught, they give you an idea, they give you an advice in the lesson plan step by step. This is what you should do. They give you activities that you can do. For example, on my matter and energy unit, there was examples on how to do on different activities, like lab activities that students would be able to do. Just different things that will keep students motivated and learning. So these are all very good resources that I plan to use. Pinterest was another example. They gave me my example from my first project on an outline for how to lesson plan. So in this outline, it showed me where vocabulary words need to go, what my statement is, what activities I'm going to put in, what days we're going to do this and what days we're going to do that. So Pinterest has also, and that's not all that Pinterest has. Pinterest has a lot of good ideas for the classroom, a lot of good idea for classroom management, a lot of good ideas for tests, and also teaching materials. So using all these variety of resources that are out there, I'll plan to use and will continue to use these different teaching resources. And all these resources will help my teaching style grow. But not only that, it will make me a more diverse and efficient teacher. The last standard says that the teacher adapts practice to meet the needs of the learner. I believe that if you were to look back over all my projects for this semester, that you will see evidence of this standard. This year I had a variety of different students in my looking back at my classroom. I had a variety of different students. In my classroom there were students who were deaf, there were students who were hard of hearing, there were students that couldn't actually talk but they had to use sign language to communicate. There was also one student in my class who was going progressively blind. So during this time for him, I not had to, but during this time, I chose to adapt my PowerPoints and my journal prompts to more of a darker background, which there were certain colors that he couldn't see very well. So I decided to do a darker background and maybe with like a yellow that was better for his eyes. But some of these techniques that I used for him worked as well for the other students in my general ed classes. So I had to come up with different ways to meet their needs, but also include ideas for my gen ed students. And so going into this class, I had already had a little practice with adapting my lesson plans to meet the needs of different students in my classroom. But if you were to look at my projects that I did over the semester, in my first project, there would be notes that we'd have to take, but in conjunction with the notes, there would be activities, and not just notes. So there would be activities to meet a variety of students' needs. So I know that not all students learn from taking notes. So my lesson plan will include hands-on activities. Um, I plan for not just the students to have notes, but they would be able to sit there. They'll be able to work on what we're talking about. If we're talking about matter, they would be able to. We would play a game to say what has matter. We would point to things in the classroom that says what has matter, what doesn't, what is mass. We would draw electron circles. Different things, because some of the learners are not just auditory learners, but you have a lot of visual learners as well. So in my second project, I designed assessments that would meet the needs of all my students. So in my actual classroom, there were certain assessments that the EC kids couldn't take, which was my deaf and hard of hearing kids and my student who was going blind. But my Gen Ed students, they would get a different version of the test than my EC kids would get. So I've had it practice adapting lesson plans, but during, like for example, my second project, this would meet the needs of different students. So some students may not be good at taking certain tests. So we wouldn't give just a simple question test, a 10 question test with multiple choice. On one test would be the students would have to draw a picture of something from our PowerPoints, like they would draw the three states of matter. That would be a type of formative assessment. Or students can write a postcard or write a letter to an inventor in the past who was studying matter and energy, and they could tell them how much their what the inventor was working on back then, how far it progressed today. So there are a lot of different test taking tips, different types of tests that I created during my second project, which adapt to each type of student's ability and learning. So students that are not good test takers, there's another alternative. I adapted tests to meet students who are not well at taking tests, and designed other types of assessments to include everybody so that I can adapt the learning to each individual students. One summative assessment would be that the students would create a podcast in which their fellow classmates would call in, and they would answer questions on the lessons that we would be talking about in class. And that would also be a great way to, that's another way that I adapted my lesson plans or my assessments to meet the needs of fellow students and their classmates. Um, if you look at my third project, it also shows how I met the standard. Each student is different and needs something different in the classroom. Some students need to have agenda. My third project, again, just to refresh your memory, was classroom management. So even dealing with this third project, you can see how this standard shows up. Like I said, each student is different. Each student needs something different. Some students need to have an agenda that they see on the board every day to so that they know what they're doing. And some students need to stay constantly active. So there would be a journal prompt on the board that students can look at. And I understand some students cannot bottle up energy all inside of them. So some students will need to allotted time set aside so that they would be able to talk and process what we're learning in class on their own and work it out with their other classmates. So all of this is incorporated into my third project. And all this information will continue to follow me throughout my teaching career. Learning all this new information has helped me and will continue to help me adapt my classroom even further to meet the needs of all the types of learners in my classroom. So every aspect of this project that I have worked on, these three projects that I've worked on this semester, have continued to shape me and redefine how I see classroom management. How do I see lesson planning? How I see different types of assessments? So if you go back and look at all of my projects over this semester, you will clearly see that I've met all the standards. I've met every requirement of TASC Standard 9. And based on my experience from these projects and everything that I've learned over the course of this semester, I really believe that I have met all of the requirements for this standard. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule and listening to this project. And hopefully you will agree that I've met all the standards.